Hi, I'm Alasdair Post-Quinn from Falling Blocks Designs. I've been developing double knitting techniques and designing patterns for over 20 years and have helped thousands of knitters like you learn and expand their knowledge of double knitting. In 2022 and 2023, I ran a series of recorded virtual workshops, and I'm now releasing those recordings for free. Why? Check the blog post I've linked below. You'll also find a handout for this workshop and some other useful links. Please note, this recording is from a live recorded virtual workshop, so it's not as polished or concise as a tutorial made for this format might normally be. As I have time, I may choose to re-record some of these workshops. Without further ado, please enjoy.
Hello folks, this is Alasdair Post-Quinn from Falling Blocks Designs, and you are here, hopefully, for double knitting lace. I'm going to start off with a little slideshow about myself and my work, and then do a little show and tell, and then we'll get into the knitting. You should, at this point, have a little bit of homework done, about this much. Just a couple of rows with a little bit of patterning in it as the homework called for, and as the handout has in its first couple of rows. We'll talk about that in a bit. Let's start off with these slides though. So, as I said, I am Falling Blocks Designs. double-knitting.com is my website. You probably already know that because you had to enroll there to get into this class. Other places you can find me: my blog, my Facebook page, my Ravelry page, my mailing list, which you had the opportunity to join when you signed up potentially, but you can also go to double-knitting.com/sign up if you want to join any of my workshop interest lists, which are lists for people who are interested in specific workshops, want to find out when or specific categories of workshops anyway, want to find out when those are happening next. And then my Patreon as well. Right now, its primary use is to give discounts on workshops. So I do hope to make it more productive in the future, but at the moment, anyone who joins that gets a pretty generous discount on workshops and recordings. I've done a couple of books. My first was Extreme Double Knitting. It came out in 2011. The revised edition came out in 2018 after I got the rights back from the publisher. And then my book, Double or Nothing, came out in 2016 in between those two. Double or Nothing is probably the one you're going to want if you're interested in double knitting lace. There was just a tiny amount of it in the appendix of Extreme Double Knitting, and the concept was considerably more fleshed out in Double or Nothing. And I've got some standalone patterns as well. Anything you buy off my website will come with a free PDF download. And of course, you can just get the PDFs if you want. And that's about that. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple of things for a show and tell. There is one piece I don't have, unfortunately, due to the fire. It was a fire that took my house and about 40% of my samples. I luckily did get a bunch back, including this one, but the cowl, the spring willow cowl, has not been replaced yet. So anyway, this is called a denith, and I unfortunately can't easily show myself and the thing itself because it is gigantic. I can't even show the entire piece on screen. It's about 7.5 feet wide. And it is, as you can see, a large double knit shawl with quite a bit of lace in it. We've got this lace sort of cable-ish motif, and then these feathers making up the wings. So this is a pattern that I initially picked up in a Barbara Walker treasury, but I found it wasn't exactly what I needed because it was the wrong way up. And so I actually had to design this from scratch to be able to do it upside down or work it in the opposite direction from the way that it was charted initially. And it's not as simple as that. So you really just had to reimagine it from scratch. And this is what I ended up with. So it is fully charted from scratch by me. So anyway, this is This is the identity shawl. It is the very last pattern in Double or Nothing. And the reason that is important is because of the way my books tend to work is that they start you off at the basics and then you build and build and build and build. So you can imagine the last thing in the book is probably among the more complicated. So so yeah, it's got a lot of techniques in it and a lot of stuff that we're not going to cover in this workshop. However, I do have later on this season even, I think in the fall, I have an advanced double knitting lace workshop, which is going to build off of this one and go further into the techniques I used for the identity shawl and some other stuff as well. I've got one other piece that uses double knit lace, but it's very hard to see. I'll show you where it is. I'm using the lace here because yarnovers are just a different type of increase, really. They're an increase that has a hole in it. And so here you can see, if I spread out these leaves, you can see the holes along the bottom, but they're not immediately visible. It's just the most convenient increase I could use, and it looks nice if you spread the leaves out, but the leaves themselves don't generally spread out on their own. You have to pull them out to see the lace. But it does make for another nice little technique to throw into a relatively complex pattern like this. This is the honey locust pattern out of my Wuxing 5 elements. Yeah, there's a lot more here than just lace. And that's really about it that I've got to show. I do have just our little sample that we'll be working today. And I'll bring this out on the hand camera every now and then because there's stuff that I want to show you in it. Speaking of the hand camera, I'm going to bring that in a moment, but first I'm going to take us to the handout. So, so the handout, you should have your own copy of this. If you don't already, you should click on the handout image in the workshop portal, and it'll give you a PDF version of this. This is just the last page of the handout. The rest of it gives you some instruction, but a lot of the instruction is here in the workshop. So what we're going to do here is you should have already done the first 2 rows of this. The third row, we're going to do a series of yarnovers and decreases. Now, if you read down here, it says work all yarnovers in the unlinked style. Optionally, use the linked style for these other rows. Linked and unlinked styles, I will teach you. These are different styles of yarn over. Largely what you're dealing with here is whether the yarn over is wrapped forwards or backwards, and then what you have to do to process it in the following row after that. The reason that you might use a linked or unlinked yarn over, right now I will say that unlinked yarn overs do not link the fabric together. You wouldn't necessarily expect a yarn over to do that, but they do by default. If you wrap them the same way you would normally wrap your yarn. If you wrap them backwards, you will end up with 2 separate layers that will stay separate. The thing about that is that if you don't work color work into the row, your entire row will stay separate. Fortunately, unlinked yarn overs play very well with color work, which is why, as you can see in this row 3, we've got yarn overs right next to color changes. Also right next to decreases, although that is technically just a coincidence in this particular case. We have yarn overs in row 5 further away from the color changes, also further away from the decreases, but more importantly, further away from the color changes. And so in row 5, for example, we're going to use linked yarn overs. So it's all down to a matter of what the pattern calls for and what your preference is. And as we go through this, I'll explain more about them and why you might use them and what their benefits are. So we're going to start off with the unlinked style in row 3. So here we are with our couple of rows of double knitting, our rows 1 and 2 out of this pattern. And now, starting on row 3, we're basically going to go right into the techniques. We're doing a linked pair, and then a yarn over, and then a decrease, and then a plain pair, and then a decrease, and then a yarn over, and then repeat that for a while. So this is what we're going to do. The linked pair, as you may already know, is worked with its knit through the back of the loop. It's just going to match what you have in the row below. So color A, yarns to the front, put your needle into the next stitch as if to purl, but before you purl, twist the 2 yarns around each other. Finish the purl from beyond the twist, and that will link the edge together. There are a number of places where the linked pair is not necessary in this pattern, but at least for the first few rows, it will be. Okay, so the next thing in the chart is a yarn over, but I'm not going to do the yarn over just yet. I want to first reorder the next 2 pairs, because as soon as I've got the yarn over on, I want to be able to do another stitch, which solidifies or stabilizes the yarn over, or yarn overs in this case, as it is 2 different ones right next to each other. And so if I do my yarn overs now, and then I have to spend my next few seconds reordering pairs, I run the risk of losing the yarn over, or at least having the yarn over switch itself, which I'll explain as we do more of them. So I'm going to reorder these next 2 pairs to get ready for the decrease, which comes next. Reordering pairs, in this case, we have a single decrease. It doesn't matter what direction the decrease is. When you come to a decrease, you're going to reorder the next 2 pairs. And you're going to reorder them from knit, purl to knit, knit, purl, purl. So you're going to take these 2 middle stitches and switch them so that you have your 2 purls together and your 2 knits together. And I'll show you a couple different ways to do this. If you've done my off the grid class, you have already absorbed this technique, I'm sure. But on the off chance anyone has not, I want to make sure you know how to do this. So note that I've slipped 1 stitch. This is one possible way to do this. I've slipped 1 stitch. I'm going to hold on to the knit from the front. This is the second knit in the 2 pairs, skipping over that purl. Then I'm going to pull the left-hand needle out of 2 stitches and catch the 1 stitch, the 1 purl that flipped to the back. So that rearranges the 2 middle stitches so that I now have 2 knits in a row followed by 2 purls. Now I'm going to put that back the way it was, and I'm going to show you a different way to rearrange those 2 middle stitches, because that method uses something a little like cabling without a cable needle, which is a little harrowing for some people. But for single decreases, there is another way to do it, and that is, once you've slipped the first stitch, the next 2, you're going to slip them as if to knit 2 together. So put your needle into both of them as if to knit 2 together, and then just slip them. Now, when you've done that, it has changed the order, but it has also twisted them. So when you pass them back to the left-hand needle, you have to untwist them. Either of those options will give you a reordering that you can use. Note 2 knits in a row, followed then by 2 purls. So we're going to do a left slanting decrease here, but don't forget you have a yarn over to do first. Now that the reordering is done, we have to do that yarn over to make sure that we're following the pattern. The yarn over is going to be in AB color order. If you note the chart, the yarn over happens on an AB pair, the light colored pair on this layer, which means that we want our color A to go first and then our color B. And you can do this in one of two ways. This is going to be a reverse yarn over. A standard yarn over, if I were just using a single yarn, a standard yarn over would do this. Wrap in the same direction as your yarn is wrapping. A reverse yarn over works like this. Starts at the back, comes to the front, and then wraps to the back again. It wants to end up at the back totally, so that you can start with a knit on the next stitch. Note I was just doing a single yarn for illustration, but we're really going to be doing it with 2 yarns. So since this is a reverse yarn over, we're going to take both yarns together. Lead with the first one, lead with color A, and bring them both together over the needle from back to front and then to back again, because we want the yarns to remain at the back so that we can start the next stitch as a knit. Now, if this is difficult for you for any reason, you can do them separately. Start with color A and then color B. And then once they're over, you can hold on to them together. Just make sure that you do them in that order so that they stay in the correct color order for that yarn over as it's called for in the chart. So I am then going to do the decrease. So I've already reordered the pairs, thank goodness, so I don't have to worry about losing my yarn over as I do this decrease. But I do still have to do, this is a left slanting decrease, which means that we're going to do the knit side, SSK, followed by a purl side, purl 2 together. And we're going to do it in BA, which means we're going to do our knit as B and our purl as A. This is, according to the chart, the decrease symbol happens on a dark colored pair, which means knit in B, or really SSK in B, followed by purl 2 together in A. So we've got a linked pair, a reverse yarn over in AB, and a left slanted decrease in BA. And then we're just going to do a plain AB pair here in the middle. Well, it's the middle of a repeat. It isn't really the middle of the piece. Then the next thing on is another decrease. There's no yarn over before it, so one way or the other, we have to reorder our pairs. So you're going to reorder from knit, purl to knit, knit, purl to knit, knit, purl, purl. There we go. And then we're just going to immediately do the decrease because we don't have a yarn over to do before it. This is going to be a right slanting single decrease, which is going to start us off with a knit 2 together in color B. It's color B again because the decrease symbol appears on a BA pair. And so therefore we're going to be doing our first move, in this case a knit 2 together in color B, and then yarns to the front. The second move to mirror the knit 2 together is going to be an SSP, which is a little bit of a weird technique, but very similar to an SSK in some ways. We're going to start it off the same way, slip 2 knitwise, pass 2 back, and now we're going to purl 2 together through the back of the loop. This is usually one of those annoying techniques, but because I just untwisted the stitches, it's actually very easy to do. Purl 2 together through the back of the loop in color A. So that gives us a right slanting decrease in BA. And I'll just flip it over so that you can see that it's slanting toward that middle stitch on both sides. And now we've got another yarn over to do. And this is again an unlinked, meaning a reverse yarn over. So we start at the back, bring both yarns over the front and making sure that they stay in the AB color order, and then make sure that they go to the back together so that you can do the next pair. And again, you can do the two separately if that's easier for you, but they do end up having to be together again at the end of the technique. And then it's just one plain pair. Okay, so this is the entire repeat essentially. We've got yarn over, left slanting decrease, plain pair, right slanting decrease, yarn over, plain pair. So the linked pair doesn't count as as part of the repeat. That's just an edge. So then we're just going to do the same thing over again. Yarn over, left slanting decrease, plain pair, right slanting decrease, yarn over, plain pair. I didn't mention the specific colors that we're using, but they are in the chart. So we're going to do this essentially 3 times across this this row, and hopefully with each new one you do, it's going to get a little easier and a little easier to do. So we're going to start by reordering our pairs again. I'll demo again the method that does not involve dropping stitches. So you can slip 1 stitch, slip as if to knit 2 together, those next 2 stitches, and pass them back, untwisting them as you go. Then we're going to not forget to do the yarn over or yarn overs. This is unlinked again, so start at the back, go over the needle to the front, and then bring it to the back again. Then, now that your pairs are already reordered, we're going to SSK in color B. Oops. There we go. Followed by a purl 2 together in color A. Then a single pair. And another decrease, so we're going to reorder these pairs again. This is going to have us doing a knit 2 together in color B. Followed by an SSP in color A. So slip 2 knitwise, pass 2 back, purl 2 together through the back of the loop. And then another one of those double yarn overs in reverse, and another plain pair. So we're going to do that whole set of techniques once more, and then we come to the end of the row. Now, this last yarn over is a little finicky because the thing right after it is a slipped pair. So it's not really particularly well anchored into place until you do the next row. So just do your best with it. Wrap those two yarns backward around the needle, and then do your slipped pair. So yarns to the back, slip one, yarns to the front, slip the other one. As you bring those yarns to the front, just hold them together and be careful that nothing happens to that yarn over. It's very easy since it hasn't really been anchored in place right now. You can see I've got yarn going over and then just in between those two stitches and out. It's not really properly anchored at the moment, but it can stay there until we work on top of it in the next row, and then it will be finally stable. So here we go. If I stretch it out, you can see where the yarn overs are happening. You can also see that they're all seated backwards as compared to the rest of the stitches. What that means, of course, is that in the next row, we're going to have to work them through the backs of their loops to make sure that they are they remain as holes and not closed up sort of semi stitches. So on the way back, this is going to be a matching row, essentially a row in which everything is everything that's on the needle is matched in color and stitch. But of course, yarn overs aren't really a stitch yet, so you have to process them however the row requires. So in this case, the row requires, because it's a rest row or a matching row immediately after an unlinked yarn over row, yarn overs are going to be worked with both stitches through the back of the loop. I'll explain what that means as I do them. We're going to start off with a linked pair here. We're going to just have to be fairly careful for these first couple of stitches, just to make sure that we have the yarn over properly anchored in. But it's now wrapping around this stitch, so it shouldn't be a risk. We're going to do our linked pair. Now we have a yarn over to process. Note that the color order should at this point be BA. It was AB when you made it, and you've now turned the work over. You want to make sure that it is in the correct color order. It is always possible for these loops to hop over each other, and if you work them as you see them, you may end up with the wrong color pair in this next row, which will throw you off in future rows. So you just want to make sure that you're seeing them as BA, and note that I'm now going to knit through the back of the loop in color B and purl through the back of the loop in color A. This is the most natural thing that you could possibly do with this increase. I'll show you what I mean when I get to the next one, as I have several to do in this row. So for the non-yarn over pairs, we're just going to match color and stitch. Just match everything you've got on the needle. Not every layer 2 row in this pattern is a matching row, but this one is. Okay, so here I am at another yarn over. Again, it's in BA color order. I don't need to change it, but do keep an eye on that if yours is not. But also note that if I tried to knit and purl this normally, it would feel very weird because it's seated backwards on the needle. And if I tried to knit it normally, it would feel twisted as I did it. I don't want to twist this hole closed. I want it to stay as open as possible, which means in order to keep that openness, I want to work that knit through the back of the loop and the purl likewise. Whoops. Something odd just happened there. Okay, I got my yarn over. Yep, I just missed a stitch there. Okay, we're good. So I'm just continuing this row. I'm matching every color and stitch, except for the yarn overs. I am matching the colors, making sure they are in BA color order before I begin, and as long as they are, working both stitches through the backs of their loops. Knit first and then purl, but always through the back of the loop. The rest of the stitches in the row are just worked normally. You don't have to work them through the backs of their loops. Now, when I get to the end of this row, I'll stretch it out and I'll show you what the whole thing looks like. All right, we're at our last yarn over. And the last pair is a slipped pair as usual. Okay. So I'm going to stretch this out so you can see, and put my finger behind it so you can see that there's a hole all the way through. Now, double knitting is not two layers, one immediately on top of the other like this. It's offset very slightly, which means that when you put a hole in one of these, you're not immediately going to see the hole behind. You're going to see maybe a little bit of the other color. With unlinked yarn overs, the holes are as lined up as they can be, but in order to see straight through, you have to tilt it a little bit. To line up with the direction of the slant, or the direction of the two yarns, or the two layers offset, essentially. In order for these two to appear like one is on top of the other, you essentially have to tilt them like that. And that allows you to see the holes straight through. Tilt them in the other direction, they end up blocked. But they do go straight through, because there are holes on both layers that are more or less lined up with each other. Okay, so I'm going to bring the chart back in and talk about what we're going to do in the next row. So the next row is row 5. In row 5, we've got a new set of techniques. One of them is obvious, the double decrease, which was not present in row 3. And the other one is not obvious. The yarn overs are going to be worked as linked yarn overs. This is a choice of the knitter to some degree. Once you understand why you would want linked versus unlinked yarn overs, you can decide which ones to use at any given point. We're going to use them here because A, I want to show you how they're done, and talk about why you might want to use them. And B, this is a row where they are really, to some degree, the best solution, because you have your color changes at least one pair further on from where the yarnovers are. Now, I generally prefer to go with unlinked regardless of where my color changes are. So unless I've got a really pressing reason to use linked, I'm not going to. But you may find them easier to do to some degree, because they are more faithful to the process of lace. They work in a way that is a little closer to the way lace generally is worked, in that they are wrapped forwards rather than backwards. I consider the two techniques as sort of a process and product dichotomy. The linked pairs are more faithful to the process, and the unlinked ones are more faithful to the product of what you would normally see if you had a single layer lace piece. Without further ado, let's get into row 5. Okay. So again, in row 5, the first thing that we're going to do after the linked pair is a yarn over, but because my color work is further away from the yarn overs, and also the color work and the decreases are pretty much in the same places throughout this pattern, that means that the decrease is further away from the yarn over, and I don't have to do any preparation before I do the yarn over. So I do the linked pair, I immediately do a yarn over, and then a plain pair, and then the double decrease, plain pair, yarn over, plain pair, yarn over, plain pair, double decrease again. Okay, so we're gonna start this off as usual with a linked pair. And then we're going to do yarn over between the linked pair and the next pair. Now, this yarn over is going to be worked forward, like this. So you can also do this as 2 separate moves. 1, 2, like that. Or together. Now, it is important that they stay in the same color order as the as is called for in the chart. What's called for in the chart in this case is an AB pair, and so we're going to try to make sure that they stay in AB arrangement. You're going to want to take the next stitch, which is going to be also an A, from underneath right here, rather than from over the top. You take it from over the top, you run the risk of this happening. You run the risk of them jumping over each other. If you take it from underneath, it cements the order, and not much you can do is going to change the color order. There's another reason for it too, but I'll talk about that in the next row where we do this. Essentially, what I'm going to do here is I'm taking you through a little tiny bit of the theory of what we're doing here. But then I'm going to take us through a bit deeper theory in rows 7 and 9. To, once you've had an opportunity to try the techniques, I will go through why they work and your pros and cons for them in the next rows where we use them. So anyway, we're doing a double linked yarn over, meaning forward yarn over, starting at the front, going to the back. Simple as a normal yarn over, except with 2 yarns held together, or yarn over with A, yarn over with B. Once they're back together again and at the back, you can go ahead and do that next AB pair. Now, next up, we have a double decrease. So as you can imagine, what this is going to require is another bit of reordering, except that the reordering is now going to involve 3 pairs rather than 2. A double decrease is 3 pairs becoming 1 rather than 2 pairs becoming 1. So we're going to have to reorder from knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl to knit, 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 purl, 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 and then do 2 paired knit and purl double decreases. So we're going to start off as before by slipping that first stitch, that first knit stitch. Then, and there is no shortcut version of this. You have to do it as, okay, you don't absolutely have to do the cabling without a cable needle like technique where you drop 2 stitches and then grab them on the back. There is another way to do it, but it is not what I would call a shortcut. And I don't have it in mind right now, so I'm not going to show it at the moment. We're going to hold on to the 2 knit stitches like this at the front, skipping over the 2 purls, and also the 3rd purl is further along. We're not technically skipping over it, we're just putting the needle in to these 2 they're not pairs, actually. It's the end of a pair, the beginning of one, the end of one, the beginning of one, and the end is left alone here. But we are putting our needle into the second 2 knit stitches, having slipped the first one already, skipping over the 2 purls. And we're going to pull the left-hand needle out of 4 stitches, and we're going to grab the 2 purls at the back. So grab the first purl, and then the second. So just be careful about that. You can pinch the base to make sure that they don't drop. I'm going to do that once more just to make sure that you get to see it again. My yarn is fairly grippy, so it's less likely to be a problem. But if your yarn is more slippery, just be careful as you do this. So again, the next 3 pairs are getting reordered. So I'm going to slip 1. I'm going to hold these 2 knit stitches at the front, skipping over the purls. I'm going to pull my needle out of 4 stitches. The 2 at the front that I held are still on the right-hand needle. The 2 that flip out to the back get caught on my left-hand needle. So I now have 3 knits on the right-hand needle, 3 purls on the left-hand needle. And I'm going to put everything back on the left-hand needle so I can work it. All right, so this technique that we're going to do is a centered left-slanting double decrease. The reason it is both centered and left-slanting is because it is centered on the middle stitch of the 3. The 2 outer stitches fold over the top of that stitch along the outside, but the one that ends up topmost is the rightmost one, which means that it is nominally, anyway, left-slanting. This is the easiest of the centered double decreases that you can do, and probably the easiest of any of the double decreases. It is important that we have a nominally slanting one here. The right-slanting one is harder to do, so I'm going to go with the left-slanting one. The direction really doesn't matter. So yarns to the back. You're going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 2 together in color B. It's color B because the double decrease symbol appears on a BA pair. And then don't forget to pass one over and off. So this technique you may have seen before as CDDP. That's the knit side version of it anyway. But the purl side version of it is similar, but not quite the same. So for this one, we slipped 1 knitwise, knit 2 together, passed one over and off. Remember that each of these has to be paired so that they appear in the same direction, or in mirror images, really, on the other layer. You remember that in row 3, when we did a right slanting decrease, we did a knit two together, followed by an SSP. Well, here we have a knit two together as the second part of the move, part of the decrease after the slipped pair, or excuse me, after the slipped stitch. So you can probably imagine that this next purl side version is going to involve an SSP. So I'm going to slip one purlwise, then I'm going to SSP with these next two using color A. So that's slip two knitwise, pass two back, purl two together through the back of the loop. Then don't forget to also pass that slip stitch over and off. So I'm just going to show you what this looks like. You'll notice that we started out with these two pairs, 3 pairs in between them, so 3 pairs apart. We brought them together so that there was a single pair in between them in row 3, and then in row 5 we make them connect, making that sort of the tip of a triangle. And if I flip it over, you can see that we have the same thing going on the other layer. Now, we are trying to make sure that this doesn't change shape, which means that every decrease has a corresponding increase, or yarn over, really, in this particular case, and every increase has a corresponding decrease. For these double decreases, of course, their corresponding yarn overs are, there are 2 of them. In order for you to compensate for losing 2 stitches in a double decrease, or losing 2 pairs rather in a double decrease, you need to have 2 yarn overs. In this case, 1 on either side. That's usually the way it goes. So I'm going to do 1 plain pair here. Then I'm going to do another forward yarn over. And I'm going to take the new color A for the next pair from underneath here to make sure that I'm continuing the movement of the yarn and not endangering the color order of that yarn over. And again, so I did the double decrease, a plain pair, a yarn over, a plain pair, a yarn over, a plain pair, and now it's another double decrease. So as before, the double decrease is worked by holding all the knits at the front. First one you can just slip, the other 2 you have to hold, and then pulling the needle out of 4 stitches. Oops, sorry, I'm off center there. 4 stitches, and then catching them at the back. All right, so now that we've got that done, we're going to do the double decreases themselves. We're going to slip 1 knitwise, knit 2 together in color B, pass 1 over and off, yarns to the front, slip 1 purlwise, SSP, so slip 2 separately knitwise, pass 2 back, purl 2 together through the back of the loop in A, and then pass that slip stitch over and off. And this is followed by 1 plain pair, one forward yarn over, one plain pair, another forward yarn over, another plain pair. Okay, and I'm just going to reorder the next two pairs, do the same double decrease that we've been doing. And then we're just going to do one more plain pair, a yarn over, and a slipped pair. This has the same problem as the previous row where you're doing a slipped pair immediately after a yarn over. So again, just be careful about that. Forward or reverse, you still have the same kind of problem. So the fact that you're not really anchoring in that next pair. Or anchoring in the yarn over with another pair. So just be careful. As a matter of fact, it's perhaps even more dangerous here because as you can see, it's very easy. I've done the yarn over, I've done a slipped pair here at the back. Now as I bring the yarns to the front, oops, sorry, back on camera, back, as I bring them from back to front, it's very easy to have them just do that rather than that. And it's also very easy for them to lose their color order. So we'll just be careful about that on the way back to make sure that the yarn over is in the correct place and that its color order is correct. You can already see that it's interfering with the other pair. So as we go back, we'll put them back in their place. So row 6, I'm going to bring the chart back in again, is not a matching row or rest row. It is not going to match everything that you have in the row below. Some of it will, some of it won't. You are going to work always. Your yarn overs are always going to be worked with the same color order as they are, but the stuff in between the yarn overs is going to change. So here you can see that in the previous row, it might have been AB, BA, AB. It's actually going to be the case in the next row, but because it's a layer 2 row, it's going to look reverse. This is worked as an AB pair. This is worked as a BA pair. This is worked as an AB pair. So all 3 of these are reversed from what's in the row below. But as you can see, above the yarn overs and in this empty space, it's all matching what you have in the row below. So just be careful that you're following the chart. Essentially, all you're doing here is setting up another base similar to what you did in your homework to do the same stuff that we were doing in the previous rows, but offset. So row 7 is very similar to row 3, but it is offset somewhat. And in order to do that offset, you have to set up in row 6 the color changes in their correct places. Okay, so as I said, this first sort of jumble of pairs we have to be very careful about. The first one is obviously our edge pair. We want to make sure that as we pull that off, we're not also pulling the yarn over. So make sure that yarn over stays where it's supposed to be. Bring the yarns forward. And now we need to make sure that we're fishing out the other edge pair. There we go. We now have our yarn over separate from the edge pairs. And then we're going to twist and finish the purl. And now we've got our yarn over in the correct arrangement. since a stitch or pair has now been done beyond it, the linked pair being that pair, it's a little bit more stable, but of course it will finish its stability when you work on top of it. Now, this is just it is wrapped forward, so it is just going to be a normal double knit pair, not worked through the back of the loop. And then the next 3 pairs are going to be color changed from what you have in the row below. There are also color changes in the row that you are working, so you're doing essentially 3 color changes in a row. One from BA to AB, and then back to BA again, and then back to AB again. And then finally, we're going to do just BA pairs across the next 3 pairs. 2 of them are yarnovers. The one in the middle is not, but they're all going to be worked as BA pairs. As you approach those yarnovers, just be careful that they are already BA pairs. You want to work B into B and A into A. If the yarnovers have hopped over each other, you need to put them back in place before you work them. Oop. And be careful not to just go on autopilot. Those 3 pairs are in BA, but then we've got another 3 color changes. And we've got 3 pairs here, all in BA. Now, note that those 2 yarnovers, they were sort of sitting like that. So just be careful as you approach them. If you're running into a yarnover you expect to be in a particular color order and it's not, just take a closer look at it. See if you can figure out how the rearrangement happened and undo it. It's usually pretty easy to do. And then finally, another set of those 3 color changes. And following it up with a slipped pair as usual. Okay. So I'm going to show you what these yarnovers look like. Note that they're a little different. They are actually yarnovers, but they, rather than showing you a hole in the back, they're showing you a background. The other layer is sort of stuck in place. What these yarnovers do is, as I mentioned before, you got these 2 layers, one sort of offset from the other. If you were to separate them out and put a hole here, you would be seeing this layer on the other side. Having them want to line up like this is kind of what the unlinked pairs, unlinked yarnovers do, which is why you can see the holes straight through. Having them anchored in this position so that they stay offset is what the linked yarnovers do, which means that you're going to end up seeing a background through the yarnover holes. The holes are also not quite as large, which is perhaps both a blessing and a curse. Obviously, people like if you're doing lace, you like to be able to see the holes and like to be able to see why you're doing the work. But at the same time, these slightly smaller holes with a background built into them do perhaps lend themselves to other uses of the fabric, which might allow for colder weather garments that still use lace, because you don't have holes that go all the way through, or the holes aren't as prominent. Just to show that from the other side. There we go. See, we've got the holes, but we've also got a background built in. And yes, if you tilt in one direction or the other, you will be able to see through. It's not like it's completely hole free. It's just that the holes are not lined up exactly with holes on the other side. Okay. So I'm going to go into row 7. And as I do row 7, I'm going to go back to the unlinked style again for row 7 for a couple of reasons. First of all, you know, I'm trying to teach both techniques here, but second of all, the yarn overs and decreases are once again right next to each other. If you do linked yarn overs in a situation like that, bad things happen. And I'll talk about that, about what exactly happens. I can even demo it if you want to see. The other thing that's happening slightly differently in row 7 is there is no linked pair at the very beginning. This is not specific to double knit lace. I do this in a number of different places. What is important is that the very first thing that happens after that first pair is a color change. The decrease is you know, less important here, but structurally the color change is what links the fabric together. Because the fabric is linked together by the colors changing from the first pair to the second pair, you don't need to have a linked pair here at the beginning. The color change performs the same function, essentially. If it throws you off not to do a linked pair there, then it's not a big deal. You can do a linked pair. I'm just saying you don't need it there. So there's going to be that in row 7 and in row 8. Again, in row 9, it is necessary to have a linked pair because we don't have a color change immediately after. Row 9 is a little bit special because it isn't just offset row 5. We have to manage our yarn overs and decreases in a way that allows for them to be paired when there isn't room to do another set of double decreases on either side. And then in row 10, again, we don't need it. And then the next several rows, we're going to be back to linked pairs again because we don't have color changes immediately afterward again. So row 11, by the way, is the same as row 3, exactly. Row 13 is the same as row 5, etc. Basically, once we get past row 10, we will have done all, well, even row 9, we will have done all of these rows before. Rows 10 through 17 are just a repeat of the same stuff that we did in rows 2 through 9. So just to make the thing square and to give you more opportunities to explore these techniques, I've given you an extra repeat of all of the techniques. So onward then with where were we now? Row 7. Yeah. So we have in row 6 set up all of our all of the color changes that we needed in order to make sure that row 7 can be done in a coherent way. And so I'm going to do row 7 using the unlinked style, and I'm also going to talk a little bit more about the structure of what's happening. And then when we get into row 9, I'm going to compare and contrast it with the unlinked style as well. So starting off with row 7. Fortunately, in row 7, we don't have a yarn over immediately after or immediately before, at the end, our edge pair, which is nice. So as you can see here, I'm not doing a twist between my knit, which was done through the back of the loop, by the way. That is not changed. So you do a knit through the back of the loop, yarns to the front, and I am purling in color B, but I am not twisting them before I do that. Normally I would twist and then purl. Here I am just going to purl, leaving the edge open. And if there weren't a color change immediately afterwards, that would be a problem, but there is, so it's not a big deal. So there is a color change, but there is also a decrease. So the first thing I need to do here is reorder my pairs in order to make that decrease. So slip a knit stitch, grab the next knit stitch from the front, pull out of 2, grab the one that flipped to the back, which gives you 2 knits in a row, followed by 2 purls. And then there's no yarn over between these two, so we go right into a right slanting single decrease. So we're going to start off with a knit 2 together in color B, followed by a slip purl, an SSP. So slip 2 knitwise, pass 2 back, purl 2 together through the back of the loop in color A. There we are. So now there's a yarn over, and then a plain pair, and then a yarn over, and then a decrease. So remember, for that next paired yarn over and decrease, we are going to want to reorder our pairs before doing the yarn over. But for now, we've got a yarn over followed by a plain pair, so I can just go ahead and do my reverse yarn overs. This is the unlinked style again. Followed by a plain pair. And then I've got another yarn over followed by a decrease. So I'm going to reorder my next 2 pairs to prep for that decrease. Yarn over backwards again. And then this is an SSK. This is a left slanting decrease. So an SSK on the knit side in color B, followed by a purl 2 together in color A. And now I've got a plain pair here. And then we repeat all of the stuff that we just did. We do the decrease, a yarn over, a plain pair, a yarn over, a decrease, a plain pair, and then continue. So here I have a color change going from a BA pair to a yarn over in the opposite color order. And as I said, we're doing this all unlinked. But I want to show you what happens when you do it linked. So I'm going to do a linked yarn over here, a forward yarn over, just so that you can see what really happens when you have a linked yarn over and a color change right next to each other. So I'm going to do this forward. And then I'm going to continue. And I'm going to reorder. And you're not going to see immediately what happens until I do the next row. So right now, not much has happened, but it's really a question of how the final yarn over looks and is structurally constructed when a color change is right next door. And so I'm going to do it again here as well to show the yarn over followed by a color change rather than the color change followed by the yarn over. So we're going to do a forward yarn over here. You don't have to follow along with this. This is best done as an unlinked yarn over in this location. But just for illustration purposes, I'm going to do one here. Now, I mentioned that for the forward linked yarn overs, you always want to take the new color from underneath like this. Well, what if you got a color change? You can't take it from here because you need this color. So you just have to take it from wherever it sits. So you can see these are forward, all these are reverse. You can see them, the direction right there in the same row very clearly. So I'm just going to finish out this row. I'm going to finish it with unlinked yarn overs. I'm not going to do more of the linked ones. And that way you'll be able to see the contrast between the two techniques after I've done the next row. And then the last thing is just a slipped pair. We don't have to do yarn over after it, thank goodness, or yarn over before it. And now I'm going to go back in the other direction. And as we do this, or after we've done about 2/3 of it, I'll get to show you the difference between the unlinked and the linked yarnovers when color work is involved. So the critical thing here is that we're going to have to pay attention to the seating of the yarn as we encounter the yarnovers. The yarnover is wrapped backwards. We work through the back of the loop. If it's wrapped forward, we work through the front of the loop. So just be careful about that. This is obviously not something you will generally encounter within the same row, but you do still have to keep that in mind as you do the layer 2 row on top of the lace. Depending on which method you've chosen. Any other pair should just be worked the same way as it normally would be. Okay, so we are now at the standard yarnovers, the linked ones. I'm going to be working them through the fronts of their loops as normal pairs. Okay. So just for expediency's sake, I'm going to finish out the row and then I will compare and contrast the result. Okay. So here are the unlinked yarnovers. You can see them nice and clearly. We've got the holes that go all the way through. And here are the linked ones. This one looks very similar. This one, where'd it go? It's missing. This one, the hole is kind of there, but kind of not. And if I flip it over, the same kind of thing happens. On this one, it's there, and on this one, it's kind of missing. This is an artifact of doing a linked yarn over next to a color change. On one side of the yarn over, it looks normal, pretty normal anyway. At least normal for a linked yarn over, meaning that you'll have sort of holes that have a background, right? So this is also a hole that has a background. But on the other side of the same yarn over, there's not really a visible yarn over at all. It's just kind of a weird thing. I'm not sure what to call it. Undesirable is what I call it, because it sort of breaks the pattern. It breaks the pattern of decreases, color changes, and yarnovers. So so I don't do those. I don't do linked yarnovers next to color changes, which is why they're set up that way in row 9, to have the yarnovers as at least one pair away from their corresponding decreases, which are in the color changes. So obviously I'm going to leave those there. As I work through row 9, I'm also going to compare and contrast. This is a compare and contrast of the product. This gives you an idea of, how the unlinked yarnovers are best done and worst done. Actually, no, there's no best and worst for unlinked yarnovers. Unlinked yarnovers work anywhere. Linked yarnovers only work in specific places, and so you have to be careful about using them. And so I'm going to show another row that uses linked yarnovers, but I'm also going to talk a little bit more about the process rather than just the product, because there are some issues also with the process of the technique. So again, starting off row 9. Oh, no, row 9 actually does have a linked pair, because row 9 has some special stuff going on here. We're going to, up until now, the decreases have been within the color work, within the, what would be, for lack of a better word, the motif part of this. This has a sort of obvious background and motif. We have the background being what we cast on with and what the lace parts show up in, and the motif being where these triangles are built, and or at least chevrons. They don't have bottoms, so they're not really triangles. And where the decreases occur. So I've lost my train of thought, so I'm just going to go on with row 9. Oh, right. I was saying that in row 9, in order for us to have the yarn over and a decrease correspond to each other, I don't actually have a place to do a decrease that is in the motif, so I'm doing it in as close to the motif as I can do it. So I am going to do this, reordering. It actually occurs to me as I'm doing this, I actually could have done it within the motif, and I'll keep that in mind for a future revision. But for the moment, to go with the chart I have, we're doing a decrease in AB. Having done a linked pair here, we can do a decrease in AB here without any concern about our edge coming apart. And then, because there was not a color change immediately prior, we can do our yarn over linked rather than unlinked. So I want to talk, before I go any further with this, about the process differences here. I mentioned that what I want you to do when you do this yarn over, this forward set of yarn overs, is to take the next color from underneath. And because I want to make sure that my yarn overs and color changes are never next to each other, that next color is always going to be the one you need, this color, color A. assuming the yarn over was done in color A, which in most cases it is, and certainly all in this chart. So the first stitch, the knit in the next pair, is always going to be your color A stitch. And so you're going to take that new color from underneath here, which maintains the movement of the of these two yarns. If you were to take it from over the top like this, as I mentioned, it would very likely cause the yarn over to jump, the yarn overs to jump over each other. Whereas if you take it from underneath like this, that's generally not going to happen easily. The other thing about that movement is that it is in and of itself what creates the link. What you're doing here is taking the new stitch from underneath like this. You are creating a twist in your ends. Note that it starts off looking just like a normal yarn over, but if you take it off, note they're twisted. You may or may not have noticed as I did this, I actually let the two yarns go and grabbed them again. So I do this, I let them go, and then I grab them again. When I grab them again, I'm letting them twist a little bit to put them in the correct color order for the next pair. But in doing that twist, I am creating a link within the yarn over. Now, that's a bit about the process of the linked yarn over. What about the unlinked one? Now, note that it's not as easy to do this because it's not quite natural. This is more natural for the yarn to do. You're taking the ribbon of the two yarns held next to each other. This is, you know, a far extension of my good old ribbon analogy from my intro classes. You hold the two yarns together like a ribbon, and you can wrap that ribbon around a stick, you know, in this case, a knitting needle. And when you wrap that ribbon around, it potentially stays in the same color order. If you wrap it backwards, it doesn't, it's not following the motion of the other stitches. So the other stitches, every time you make a stitch, generally, I realize it's not the case for everyone, but generally you are wrapping in this direction. Whether you're wrapping or not, the stitch is created like this. This is seated forwards on the needle. This is seated backwards on the needle. The reason for that is that most stitches are created this way, whether knit or purl. As long as the yarn overs are worked in the same way as the knit stitches, you are ending up with a coil, you know, with stitches coming off the bottom of it, but a coil around the needle. So what happens if you do one like this and then one like that? Whoops. What happens if you do that and then make a stitch and then that? Well, what happens is that it really wants to distort the stitch that you just made. So doing this runs the risk of pulling your yarn over the top. And so you just got to be very careful as you do this that you maybe pinch the base a little bit so that it doesn't do that. Doing this, that's never going to happen because it's going in the same direction as the rest of the coil that is created already on the needle. But going backwards, it's going to want to distort your fabric. It's going to want to close that yarn over by pulling when you pull too hard on it. So don't pull too hard on it, I think is basically what I'm trying to tell you here. If you wrap the yarn backwards, So from the back to the front, and then eventually to the back again. It helps if you sort of pinch a little bit here to, or at least just hold your finger there to keep it from doing that, you know. And that will give you the largest hole. But back to what I was originally saying about how to think about the link versus unlink issue. If I've done a reverse set of yarnovers like this, I can take them right off again, and there is no twist, which means I can just take the two yarns and do that and end up with a yarnover, double yarnover. The nice thing about that actually is that it makes doing afterthought yarnovers really easy. So if I found that I needed to do a yarnover in the row below, but I forgot, and I find that I've got these two bars down here, all I have to do is do that, and I've got my afterthought yarnover. Yes, it's not going to be as wide, but it will be structurally correct. So an unlinked yarnover is basically, you know, the same structure as an afterthought yarnover, or vice versa, but wider, you know, more hole is involved. So, so that's basically the idea behind the process of the two. Now, let's think a little bit about what the process means. So, if you do it reverse like this, and it doesn't therefore twist, then that means there is no twist in your ends created by doing yarnovers. You're only getting the twist in your ends from the places where you normally get twist in your ends, meaning color changes and the linked pair at the beginning. However, if you are doing linked yarnovers, forward yarnovers, not only do you have the twist created by the linked pair, the twist created by your color changes, you also have twist created by your yarnovers. So every time you do a yarnover, you have a twist. Every time you do a linked pair, you have a twist. Every time you do a color change, you have a twist, but your color change can be done in either direction, and your yarnover can only be done in one. Your linked pair can also be done in either direction, but I recommend counterclockwise, which is the same direction as the yarnover twist is done. So that said, let's work up to the next color change. So this is forward. I've now just done so many in varying directions that I've forgotten which one I'm supposed to be doing. This is a linked yarnover row, so we're doing them forwards. Okay. So now I've got my color change, but first I have to reorder my pairs. This is going to be a double decrease. So I'm going to reorder again from knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl to knit, 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 purl, purl, purl. And I'm going to finish the double decrease. Now I slip the first one knitwise. This next one is where the twist comes into play, because this is the first knit stitch I do. And I can choose to take my new color from over the top or from underneath. If I take it from underneath, I am continuing more counterclockwise twist. But if I take the new color change from over the top, like this, I'm canceling out a little bit of the twist that I have been adding in from the linked yarnovers. Sorry, I thought I left a yarn over out, but it is in there. Okay. So this is just a completion of the pair, the first color change pair, and then I'm going to do another color change to back to the background again. And again, for this one, I'm going to do a clockwise color change, taking the new color from over the top rather than from underneath, which therefore undoes yet another little bit of twist. So, linked yarnovers are really best done in a fabric with no color changes because they don't talk well to color changes, and they link the fabric together without a color change. So you can have perfectly stable, solid colored lace using linked yarnovers. The problem with doing that is that you have nowhere to undo your twist. You have just every yarn over you do creates a little bit more twist and a little bit more twist and a little bit more twist, and eventually you have to deal with that twist somehow. And there is no way to deal with it on the fly if you don't have any color changes. So in these rows, we have both yarn overs, linked yarn overs, and color changes, so that I can cancel out some of the twist. But I have to have my yarn overs further away from the color changes in order to make the fabric cohesive. Unlinked yarn overs can be done anywhere, color changes or not. But if you do it in the same kind of fabric that has no color changes, what you're going to end up with is two completely separate layers of lace, only linked along the cast on and edges. Not ideal. Unlinked yarn overs are best done with color work in them, with color work somewhere in the work. And that will ensure that because there is no linking from the yarn overs themselves, it will ensure that you have ample places to stabilize the fabric by linking together at the color changes. So I'm just going to finish out this row here. Once upon a time, before the fire, I used to have a sample of a solid colored fabric that used only linked yarn overs, so that you could see what that would look like and do, but you could not see how much of a hassle it is to make it, because you know, after every row, you basically just have to let the thing dangle out so that all of the twist goes away, and then continue. And that would just it gets really onerous for a large project, but for a swatch, it's not a big deal. So I realize I'm probably not selling you on the linked yarn overs here. I still think that they have their place, and that is not merely in the dustbin, but they are, to my mind, more trouble than they're worth in most cases. But again, not just looking at it from the point of view of process, but also product. If the product is important to you, and it's important that you have this, built-in background for your yarn overs, like that one, for example, then you might consider the linked yarnovers, which do that by default. But if what you want is, holy work with lots of holes in it, that are visible all the way through, then the unlinked style is going to be your best bet. But you need to make sure that you do your color changes, or you do color changes somewhere within the work. I am couching a lot of this in terms of, people not just following my patterns, but designing their own. And the reason that I mention that is because it's really pretty easy to take an existing lace chart and double knit it once you know how to deal with all of the underlying techniques. So I'm just going to finish this out and I'll finish talking about that. Oh, no, I didn't decrease. That's why. 1 second. Something weird happened there. All right. Forward yarn over. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to bring the handout back in again to talk a little bit about translating the charts from your average charted lace piece to double knitting. You'll notice that the chart does not really look, aside from the color work in it, does not really look significantly different from your average lace chart. You've got yarn overs, you've got decreases, they correspond to each other. If I took all of the color work overlay out of this, it would be, you could obviously just knit this as a single layer piece. You can follow that in the opposite direction, of course. You can take any single layer lace chart and work it in double knitting, assuming that you follow the key. What that means is that, well, you already know how to do the yarn overs now, hopefully. You can choose, depending on what exactly you're trying to do with the piece, to follow the yarn overs as either linked or unlinked. Note that there's no difference in the symbol. It's your choice, linked or unlinked. In general, you'll do an entire piece with all linked or an entire piece with all unlinked, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. I'm mixing them up here because I'm trying to teach the different techniques. But in general, you'll choose to have the yarn over mean unlinked yarn over or linked yarn over throughout the entire piece that you are doing. The other thing that's important that you know how to do, though, is all of the decrease techniques. Here we have right and left slanting and a fairly common double decrease. There are other techniques that you're going to run into in lace patterns that are not this simple, but this will cover a lot of lace patterns. There are a lot of lace patterns that are just yarn overs and simple decreases. Single in most cases with the occasional double. Once you get into really complicated lace, then yes, there are other techniques that you're going to need to learn how to translate into double knitting. And some of that is in my books, and some of it may not be. It's stuff that I am still working on translating in many cases. But a lot of lace is open to you just using some of these basic techniques. So then what you have to do is figure out where the colors are going to go. because that's the other thing that's missing in your average lace chart, is any kind of color work. Lace and color work generally don't go together in single layer knitting, largely because the other side of the piece would look terrible. It would be you would end up with a combination of lace and stranded knitting in most cases. Now, certainly I have seen some unusual applications of lace and intarsia, where where an intarsia panel has some lace in it. But most of the time, if you want to do something like what I'm doing here, you're not going to be doing intarsia, you're going to be doing stranded knitting. And because you end up having strands along the back, obscuring your holes, it ends up looking really strange and unattractive. And that's why I think double knitting works really well here. You don't have to worry about strands. You get the opportunity to play with both yarnovers and color work within the same piece. And I could take this same chart and put the colors in different places and end up with something very different. I could have emphasized the vertical lines rather than the diagonals by, color changing different things. And in so doing, I would have probably had to choose different applications for linked and unlinked yarnovers. So you have a lot of freedom, and there's a lot of experimentation that might need to be done in order for you to find what you're looking for. But a lot of what I do is I sort of look for the motion of the lace. I look for what parts of the lace are moving around and what parts might look good color changed. In some cases, it's really obvious. For example, in the Adenith shawl, these big sort of fishtail looking things, or scale or feather or however you want to think about them, were an obvious place to put all a single color and then lace around it. I could also have, if I had so chosen, made these single lines, point at ones you can see on the screen, made these single lines an opposite color. And as a matter of fact, I did that here. So this is what it would have looked like if I had chosen to do that in the rest of the piece. And maybe it would have looked good, and maybe somebody else will give it a try, because there's really no reason why you couldn't do it. But this, as I mentioned, is all unlinked, which means that, just like in standard double knitting, I can separate out the layers up until the colors change. And what is happening at the color changes doesn't really matter. It's about the color change itself. If there are yarn overs or there are decreases, so here we have, obviously yarn overs, and then we have decreases along here. But it's the color change that keeps things linked. And so I can separate out the lace parts, I can separate out these parts, but at the color changes, it all links together. So I could have done this differently. I could have continued the colored line up the middles of each of these things. So it would have separated them into two distinct pieces, rather than a single fishtail thing. It could have been two triangles. So it's all down to the experimentation you feel like doing in your translation of a lace piece. And I always find it fascinating to see what other people come up with. Not that there are that many people doing double knit lace or designing double knit lace, but there are a few. And it's really fascinating to watch it happen. So I'm going to do this one more row just to finish off this repeat. And I think, given that I have gotten you through everything, that I'll probably just end the workshop at that point, because everything beyond that is just a repeat of the stuff I've already shown. And one of the benefits of having this as a recording is that you don't need me to do it again. You could just go watch it again from the beginning. And I don't do the bind off anymore in these workshops, because the bind off is available in my YouTube videos, and it's the same for every workshop. I will talk a little bit about it, but I'm not going to work through it yet again. So I'm just going to do one more matching row here, just to finish this off and show you the last bits of what yarnovers look like, in this case, linked ones. Now, if you were going to finish this swatch, obviously after this row, the row that I'm doing right now is row 10. It's just a matching row above row 9. It is the same exact row that you have in row 2. There's no linked pair at the beginning. Wait, is there? No, I'm sorry. Row 10 is not a matching row. Row 10 is a prep row for row 11, which is new. So I'm not going to actually match this. I'm going to actually do it as it says. Just undoing this a little bit here. Okay, so again, starting in row 10. So row 10 starts without a linked pair because the first thing that happens is a color change. And the reason the first thing that happens is a color change, because it's not the same in the row below, is because this is not a matching row. It is, again, a row to prepare for the way the color work works in row 11 and beyond. So we're basically putting the color changes back where they were in the homework, in the first 2 rows. And because what should be appearing here is forward yarnovers, you're just going to be working them standard, not through the backs of the loops. And don't forget to make your color changes where they are called for in the chart. You'll have matching pairs above the yarnovers and in the background areas, but above the motif stuff, there is a bunch of color changing to prepare you for the next row. It's supposed to be a color change. Yep. Go. Now, do keep in mind that if you are doing, anything that has color work in it, the rest rows or the matching rows are also good places to undo that twist, because these are not rows that have yarnovers in them. They're rows that are just basically plain rows with potentially some color work in them. And so those are also good places to undo bits of twist that may have cropped up. Especially if you're struggling with managing the twist while you're also managing the yarnovers. On these rows, there aren't yarnovers, so it's less to focus on. You can just think about the color changes and the direction of your twist in order to undo the twist that you have accrued thus far. There we go. So again, we've got our linked yarnovers visible here. These are the ones with the clear backgrounds on both layers. And we've got our unlinked yarnovers in the row below, which don't have backgrounds, just have holes all the way through. So I've gone through both of those sets of techniques, given you compare and contrast between process and product. And as I mentioned, everything beyond that in this swatch is just the same as what we've already done. I've got one question. Would anything change if you were working in the round? Well, that's a very good point, considering that one of my patterns, although one of them that I did not have a chance to show, the spring willow cowl, is done in the round. Not really. As a matter of fact, all the changes, of course, is that you don't ever have to look at layer 2, and so you don't have to think about the following from the opposite color order. But if you do yarnovers forward, then when you work them again in the next row or round, they're still going to be forward. If you work them backward, they're still going to be backward in the next row, and therefore you have to do the you have to work them through the backs of their loops. The only thing that really changes in the round is that, depending on the pattern, if it's an all-over pattern that uses double decreases and such, you'll notice that in row 9 on this one, I had to do something a little special in order to make sure that I had corresponding yarnovers and decreases that broke the pattern just a little bit. But it got rebuilt in the next row, and it was fine. Doing it in the round means that there may be cases where you have to do something special at the join in order to continue the pattern. But frankly, that's not a double knit specific issue. If you were doing a single layer lace piece in the round, you would also have to do something special at the join or at the jog to make sure that the pattern continues all the way across. So I would say it really doesn't change very much doing it flat versus in the round, except in the ways that double knitting usually changes flat versus in the round, in that you don't have to deal with edges and you don't have to ever look at layer 2. But aside from that, the lace work is pretty much the same flat or in the round. So it's a good question, and yeah. Okay, any last questions? I'm gonna as I mentioned, I've covered everything I need to cover in this class. There's quite a lot of it, but everything beyond this in this swatch is just repeat of the same stuff. And then the bind off, which is the same as it is everywhere else. The one thing that I would mention in terms of the lace bind off versus the bind off anywhere else is one of the things that I mentioned while doing the bind off demo is that you can choose to do it on a needle size up, which will give you slightly stretchier bind off. If your plan is to block this piece, I highly recommend you do actually do a needle size up, or maybe even 2 needle sizes up for that bind off. It's just the bind off row itself. You don't have to do it for anything else. It'll just make that edge that much stretchier. You can even do the same for the cast on. So you can do the cast on a needle size or 2 higher than you plan to use for the rest of the piece, and then do your first row onto whatever needle size you plan to use. Then for your bind off, you do the same thing. You do the bind off prep row onto a needle size or 2 up, and that's just going to make your cast on and bind off that much stretchier and therefore that much easier to block. They're already fairly stretchy on their own, so take that with a grain of salt and give it a test. It may not be necessary, but it's something that you should remember you can do. And this is one of those places where it is more likely to be necessary than it is anywhere else. So that's really the only way that the bind off would have changed from the way that it's described, but there's no difference in technique. It's exactly the same, aside from potential of using a larger needle to make it stretchier. So, all right. So, thank you for coming to this. Thank you for viewing. If you have any questions while watching the video after the fact, there's a comment section below. Just feel free to add comments in there, and I will see them and answer them. It is also entirely possible for other people to see them and answer them. So, so if other people who are also taking the class see your question, they're also free to answer them. But I will generally jump in, especially if somebody's answer is wrong or incomplete. But yeah. So again, thank you. And I'm going to quit the recording now. Second.
Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to come back anytime and use it as a reference as you expand your double knitting knowledge and repertoire. I intend to release more of these recorded virtual workshops, as well as more and more advanced tutorials on double knitting in the future. If you want to be notified on when those drop, please subscribe to this channel, or join my mailing list, or visit my blog. If you feel so inclined, please consider dropping a tip at my Ko-fi page, linked below, if you'd like to offer more regular support to my continued development of double knitting techniques and help ensure more of these videos are forthcoming. Please consider joining my Patreon. Higher tiers also get free patterns and downloadable versions of my videos. If you're interested in my books or patterns, digital copies are available on Ravelry and elsewhere, linked from my website. Depending on when you view this, physical copies may still be available. Thanks again, and stay adventurous.